Hello and welcome to WTO Forum. In recent years, the price of agricultural commodities has fluctuated wildly on international markets, paradoxically fostering both an increase in the number of hungry people around the world and deep concerns in many agricultural communities that farming livelihoods may be at risk because of low prices. Some people believe that trade as a conveyor belt between supply and demand may provide the answers. Others worry that trade is itself part of the problem. We're very fortunate to have with us today two experts on this important topic, Professor Scott Irwin from the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana and Dr. David Nabarro, coordinator of the UN High-Level Task Force on the Global Food Security Crisis. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. David, your thoughts. Can trade help?
Well, our high-level task force has been working on these issues since food prices started to go up at the beginning of 2008. We were really concerned about the reality that millions of people were just unable to get sufficient food to eat. They were having to cut back on consumption because prices had, in the space of weeks, sometimes doubled or even gone up by 2.5 times, and this had a major impact, therefore, on their standards of living. We looked very carefully to see whether smallholder farmers in developing countries were able to benefit from these rises, and we found that by and large they were not, in part because they had problems with accessing the inputs they needed, and also because of concerns about the volatility of market prices and the reality that in that volatile environment it was very hard to make investment decisions for agriculture. As 2008 moved into 2009, so prices started to come down with the more general economic contraction we saw. However, this also hasn't really helped poor people in developing countries because their purchasing power has reduced dramatically, particularly because many earning opportunities have reduced as a result of the economic situation. Where does this leave us? Well, it's clear that agricultural systems in developing countries are very much influenced by what happens in the global environment. It's clear also that if trading conditions do not favor producers in poor countries, then it's very hard indeed for the poor country farmers to be able to benefit from opportunities that happen globally. And that means that, yes, in our view, it is important to link together discussions about global trade in agriculture and also what happens for agricultural development in poorer countries. But at the same time, this has to be done with an understanding of the complex array of factors that affect the kind of decisions that farmers have to make in their daily lives.
Scott, your thoughts?
Well, given the enormous increase in agricultural and food prices in the last couple of years, some have asked questions regarding the role of speculators in terms of that tremendous run-up and then the drop in prices. There have been many that have argued that speculators were one of the major causes of the run-up and therefore connected to problems regarding food access and availability, particularly in poorer countries. So if that were true, that would be a major indictment of the trading that we have on our commodity exchanges around the world. But if one takes that argument and pulls it apart and looks at it very closely, it really doesn't hold up very well under close scrutiny. There are a number of problems with the argument that speculators are responsible basically for starving people in less developed countries. In particular, the trading that these speculators engage in is on commodity exchanges where it is basically a financial trade. They're not actually trading the physical commodity, which is where ultimately the prices are set. Secondly, there are a number of inconsistent facts that are out there in terms of the role of speculators. For one, if they were in fact causing the prices to be too high above what economists would call an equilibrium, we should have seen a buildup in the inventories of these commodities, and we didn't see anything like that over time. And emerging evidence from academic studies confirms what we've known really for quite a while that the role of any large group of speculators is generally to provide liquidity and enhance the efficiency of the way prices are discovered in these markets. And the role of these large speculators right now seems to be along those same lines.
David, you mentioned in your opening intervention the importance of creating trading conditions that are favorable to farmers in the developing world. What's the best way to do that?
Well, first of all, I think we do need to understand that many developing country agricultural markets are not robust. They're quite fragile. And so it's therefore quite important that trading is fair in agricultural goods. If, for example, a group of countries subsidize the production of certain key cropping or livestock commodities and then permit their farmers to trade those subsidized commodities in markets which are not very robust, that can have a very destabilizing effect. We're particularly concerned, therefore, about some African and Asian markets for cash crops and also for livestock, which seem to have been undermined in recent years through the trading of subsidized produce from other nations. And we would like over time to see that practice certainly reduced and ideally discontinued, so that developing country farmers have a much fairer environment within which to trade their goods.
Politically speaking, how difficult would it be to bring about conditions such as David has just mentioned?
Well, I think that as we've seen in our trade negotiations, that's always a challenge. I think one of the really unexamined parts of this problem are some of the policy responses and decisions that were made in the developed countries like the United States during this episode. For example, the United States has had locked up in something called the Conservation Reserve over 30 million acres. And why wasn't in this type of emergency situation perhaps that considered to be able to stabilize prices and perhaps this added benefit of reducing some of the problems in less developed countries.
Yeah. Do you share that view?
I think so. I suspect that in the end it will require quite careful examination by OECD countries and developing countries of what are the political impediments to creating a fairer trading environment that reduces the degree to which subsidized grains or livestock products are actually traded internationally. And those in turn will require careful work, not just on the kind of sensitive products that have been taking up such a lot of attention here in the WTO, but looking also at some of the more basic commodities, agricultural commodities that are important. And I hope that within the context of further work on the Doha round or other negotiations, the particular need to focus on agricultural trade is given a priority, because this in turn will have a very direct impact on the degree of hunger in developing countries.
Scott Irwin, final thoughts.
I think that we know that probably one of the most important responses that can come out of this entire situation is to re-energize and increase budgets for research on agricultural technology, agricultural productivity. That in turn then has a multiplier effect in terms of incomes in many of these countries. I think we know a lot about the fundamentals of how to work at this problem. We just have to get back to them.
David Nabarro? The last word.
I would agree that productivity is key, and that improving productivity, particularly in smallholder agriculture, is very important. But I would add that there are still many situations where there are high levels of agricultural productivity, and yet there are millions of people who lack access to the food and nutrients they need. So as well as looking at productivity, we also have to look at access to food and its utilization. And taken together, productivity, access and utilization are the key elements of food security on which we have to concentrate for the next 5 to 10 years if we're going to deal with this problem properly.
Scott Irwin, David Nabarro, gentlemen, thank you very much. And thanks to you for watching WTO Forum.